Hey guys, I hope everybody could hear me because I'm back in my home and I'm back on my regular computer. So hopefully the sound, the music, the audio is working great. So let me know in the comments before I get too far. But with that being said, welcome to the show. And this is where we just talk about code, and more importantly, I just want to have a discussion with you guys about what you guys doing, the topic at hand, whatever it is, it may be this week. If you saw it, I think it's a pretty good one. It's talked about when should you learn testing when learning web development as a self-taught developer. Should you learn testing? Or when is it appropriate to learn testing? And I think I like this question a lot because it's in the same vein like when should you learn algorithms and data structures, or even as simple as when should you learn Redux when learning React, right? And all those questions are legitimate questions. And the most important part about that is that there's so much stuff to learn when you're learning to code. And I'm not saying don't learn any of it. I'm just saying make sure you learn stuff in a progression in a way that makes sense. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So JR Bugs jumping on and saying, dropping a like ahead of time. Keep up the great work. Man, thanks so much. Of course, you know, always awesome, always great. And you know, this is awesome to have all you guys here. So let me know how the stream is going, if it's working or not, if you guys could hear it, because I am back on my home computer, and so I'm very curious if it's even working. So Engine Boy says it's perfect. Hopefully there's no loading, no skipping, no nothing. So that's great, I hope. And if it's a problem, we'll have to troubleshoot it. But I'm glad to be back on normal schedule, back on streaming schedule. And I also want to start making more videos. But the most important thing for all of you guys who tune, I just want to say thank you for all of you guys. And he says, I think it's buffering, has some issues here. Well, we'll see how it goes. Hopefully it's not going to be too crazy, too bad. I think I have to buy a wire, which I haven't had a chance to do so. If it's an issue during today's stream, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get that wire and plug it in, like my internet, direct into my computer. I'm like living in the middle of the woods right now, so the internet here is what it is. And maybe I'll have to even stream at 720. But if that's the case, no big deal either. I wish, you know, it wasn't a problem. But it is what it is. But today I want to talk about working on, you know, talking about when should you learn testing? Should you learn testing? What are my thoughts about it? I think the most important part is, especially when you're starting out to learn to code, is understanding that there's so much stuff to learn that you can't learn everything. And there's the right time and there's the wrong time. And with that being said, you know, before we get into the topic, I just want to say, by the way, thank you to all of you guys who are supporters of the channel, subscribers for the channel. I just recently hit 4,000 subscribers, and honestly, I couldn't have, of course, not do it without you guys. So it's huge and amazing the fact that I was some dude on the internet getting to 4,000 subscribers, which is amazingly cool. I'm pretty excited, and I'm excited for continuing this journey on YouTube. And what I want to say is that it's been helping me to speed up my journey in learning to code, and also more importantly, sharing, you know, my trials and tribulations, my failures, the things that worked, things that didn't work. And I think it's really cool that, you know, we're all about just kind of sharing our journey and making sure that we're all doing the things that we have to do. So with that, you know, just thank you to all of you guys. We have Anna here. Yo, what's up? What's up, Anna? Adrian's here, says working fine on my end. You know, thank you. We're going to continue with the stream, and I hope that my connection lasts. And if it doesn't last, it'll last. You know, a little buffering never hurt anybody. But I want to talk about learning testing. And we are going to talk about different types of testing, why you would do testing. But I want to set the stage first. So whenever you start your web development journey, right, you have to look at the standpoint from, are you learning things that are helping you solve an immediate problem that you're having. And I'll use an example of, let's say you want to build a basic HTML and CSS website. What do you think you should learn first? You should learn HTML and CSS. Your goal, the problem you're having, is to build a basic HTML and CSS website. So the most important skills that you could learn at this moment is learn HTML and CSS. So the reason why I say this is that you need to progressively work on the problem that you're experiencing at hand. So if you can't even build a basic HTML and CSS website, that's the problem you have to solve, and those are the skills you have to learn. So there's no reason for you at this period in time learn testing or even worrying about testing, because you're not even at a place where you could build a basic HTML and CSS website. And from my experience, what I discovered that instead of trying to learn everything under the sun, I have a very basic roadmap that I follow, and I've been sticking to it. And as things come up, when they become an issue at work, I learn them based on the issue that I'm having. And before I kind of talk more about it, let me show you kind of my roadmap here. And we will talk about testing, but I just want to show you what I started, and I'm going to use this in the context of telling you a story of when and how to learn things. And so let me share my screen here. So here you go. Here's the basic thing that I started with. When I first started web development, I started with learning the basics of Git, learning HTML, CSS. Then I moved to JavaScript, and then I started working Sass. Notice how there's no TypeScript. I'm not even learning React at this point. I'm not, working with APIs yet. And the idea why is because when you're starting out, if you don't have basic understanding of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, there's no reason of moving on. And hence, at this point, I wouldn't even worry about testing, because if you still try to learn HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and you haven't built an application where testing is a requirement, there's no reason for you to learn it. And so let's kind of pivot a little bit and talk about where I am in my journey and where I'm finally starting to spend time on learning testing, why I'm learning testing at this point, and also it will answer a similar question: when should you learn algorithms or any advanced concept? And so in my journey, I went through Git, I went through HTML, I went through CSS, I went through JavaScript. Of course, I know Sass, I know enough React at this point. I know styled components. I know how to work with APIs. I know Bootstrap. I'm currently learning NodeJS. I know NodeJS, but I'm currently trying to get better at NodeJS. I'm very slowly, super slowly getting into TypeScript. I know GraphQL in terms on the front end. I'm pretty familiar with Postgres. And then, Mongo and Tailwind CSS, I'm not really spending a lot of time on it now, but it's technologies that I like. And notice how I don't have Redux here and I don't have testing here, right? And the reason why is because the reason I learned HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and Sass, because they were the core basics that you need to know. Then I chose that I want to get proficient in React. Sorry about that. So I started learning React, styled components, to style oh my god, I'm dying to style my React applications, how to work with API, Bootstrap for quick and easy prototyping. And the reason why I learned this next after my fundamentals and foundations done is because these are the technologies in the second row that allow me to build applications, that allow me to build projects that I could deploy, on Netlify and show to the world, that allow me to get hired and start working. So if you cannot build a project from scratch in the set of technologies that you're using, and if you can't, or you don't have at least 3 projects in your portfolio that you could use to get hired, and you're not able to get hired, I don't really feel like you need to get into testing, because you don't have a problem that testing solves. And I want to talk about what that is. And so I've been working on my job for 6 months now, and I started building this application from scratch, and it's starting to get to a point where there's a lot of functionality now. And what happens every time I make a change, on that application, I manually test it. That means I click, I sign in, I do a bunch of other stuff. We have some very basic reporting that happens or calculation that gets done. And I constantly have to make sure the input that I provide, I get the consistent or correct answers. And when the application is small enough, it's very, very easy to manage that because you don't have a lot going on and you could easily look into the code. You could easily see what is happening. But now that the application is getting pretty decent size, what happens every time I make a commitment, every time I merge the code, I constantly have to test. I have to make sure that all the previous application is working, make sure that I did not introduce any breaking changes. And what is happening, all that manual testing takes a lot of time. So noise, and I would say that I consider myself being a mid-level developer. And this is where now I'm starting to see the problem. I'm wasting a lot of time manually testing things that I could test by automating it and using Jest and writing test cases and testing the code automatically. And not only will this make it easier for me because it will save time, because I no longer will have to test some of these things manually, but also it's going to make it easy for me after I introduce a change and I merge it to a branch. I could run my automatic test and to see if anything failed or if I introduced any breaking changes. And Oeso says, great topic. Yeah. And, thanks, man. And so this is where testing comes into play when it becomes an issue and your application gets to a point where you're looking to deploy to users. You got to make sure that you're able to test it. You're able to make sure that whenever you make changes, you're not introducing any breaking changes. So testing becomes important at this point. Hey, Steve, what's going on? Great to have you here. So the point being is, unless it's a problem that you're experiencing, there's no reason trying to learn something that you don't have a use case for. And that's why when you're starting out as a new developer learning, you want to stick to the basics. Learn Git, learn HTML and CSS, learn JavaScript, learn Sass, and build a basic project. Next, learn React or any framework, JavaScript framework that allows you to build things quicker. Learn how to work with APIs, maybe learn Bootstrap, and make sure that based on the basic technologies, your basic fundamental understanding, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and React, be able to build an application. And just like Engine Boy says here, and this is a great question that that's a good answer. I have to look into that. So Engine Boy says, hey, Paul, getting a little bit of, not off topic, but because I love when you guys ask questions, importing use state or importing React and use React use state, does the thing make a difference in code size? I don't think it does, but I don't know for sure. What I know that with newer version of React, you don't need to import React directly. You could just import in brackets use state and then use state. But that's a great question. We're gonna have to look into that. So coming back to the topic, the thing that I was saying here is that notice how when you're starting out, when you're still building projects, you haven't built out your portfolio, you don't have 2 to 3 projects that you could show your potential employers, you haven't gotten to a point where your project is so huge that you are worried about testing and functionality, right? So instead of trying to introduce testing early in your learning journey, I think you should wait until it becomes a problem that you try to solve. So I'm at a point where I would say at my job, I'm kind of like a mid-level developer, or at least getting to that point. And the application that we're building, it's finally building, it's getting pretty complex at this point, not in terms of it's complex because the functionality complex. It might have some complex functionality, but there's a lot of moving part and it's growing exponentially as we develop it. And now to being able to kind of keep track of everything and testing everything, it's much easier done by starting to implement some basic testing. And so now it's starting to become an issue where I don't want to manually test the code each time I make changes, because it's costing, you know, the company money, because I manually have to sit there however long it takes to, and I could make a mistake. And so now I'm starting to see the value of being like, okay, hey, if I do and introduce testing, I'm able to save time from the standpoint of at least I don't have to manually do the testing for the things that I could automate. So it makes things much easier to do moving forward. Now, I am new to testing, so I want to use that as a caveat. And in certain cases, I want to use an example where understanding test-driven development becomes, to me, I see the value of that concept. And if you're able to, being able to start to implement test cases and being able to test your functionality via test-driven development makes sense to me. And I'll give you one example. Obviously, I can't show you the code, but I'm gonna kind of tell you at my point where this would have helped me, and it did help me once I started implementing it. So the idea here is that I have a bunch of functions that do some calculations. And when I initially wrote the code, and Steve here says TDD is important, and this 100%, I definitely agree, believe, and I think that everybody who's looking to become a good developer over time eventually will have to learn testing. The question is, like, when is the right time? And the right time, when it becomes an end-to-end testing, is important too. We're going to talk about today just the basic testing in terms of unit testing, integration testing, end-to-end testing. And I'm going to use this example for unit testing right now. And the unit tests are the simplest test you could get started with, at least on a basic level. And 100%, each of these serve a different purpose. So I want to give an example why once your application starts to become bigger, writing tests or incorporating test-driven development becomes important, because here's a perfect example. I wrote a function that calculates, it takes a bunch of overlapping dates, and then it sees which days are overlapping, and then it normalizes the date to not count the overlapping days, but count, you know, for instance, let's say if we have one like range, I'm going to use a very simple example, Monday to Wednesday, and then we have another range which is from Tuesday to Sunday. Instead of adding the total days of those ranges, it's just Monday to Sunday. Just normalize it to 1 week. So basically that's what the function does. And when I wrote the function and I tested it myself, I ran, put the code in, it worked, and it was not throwing any errors. So the function was working based on my understanding as it should have been, right? Now, I left it alone. The application seems to be working. Nothing was breaking in it, right? And it's been a month since I wrote that, and it seems that it's working. And it's calculating the total of days is fine. Except there's a concept in that function where we have either end date when the thing actually ended, or we have expected date. And when I wrote that code where I made a mistake, I confused where it should have been end date, but it used expected end date. It kind of works the same, but it's breaking the functionality if that particular range has a date that it ended on rather than expected date. I know it sounds confusing, but here's the thing. The way I was able to find that bug is when I went back and I started writing unit tests. I started with a unit test and I wrote, given this input, what should be the output? And I ran it through that function. My function instantly failed. So my unit test allowed me to catch an error that I've missed for the past month, because it was kind of working but it wasn't. It was not using the proper date. And this is where I think testing is valuable and important. So as you start developing your application, the scope is increasing, the size of the application is increasing, and you want to have an easier way to check the code. Writing a unit test or writing the test case which will fail. So like the point of test-driven development, red, green, refactor, what you do is you write your test first, then you write your code or your function. If it's unit test, let's say you write your function to pass the test. And then once it's passing, then you could refactor to make it, you know, better, smoother, whatever it is that you got to do. And this becomes super important because now you have a way to start catching a lot of your errors early on. And this becomes super important when you already have users on your system, you already deployed your application. You don't want to make changes to the code base and not have a way to automatically test it where you're able to catch those errors. You know what I mean? And so the idea is, when I was talking to my boss, he's like, yeah, we were working on minimal viable product. We're now starting to get to a point where we're going to roll out certain things. So he's like, okay, we want to start introducing test cases and trying to get 70% at least, you know, application test coverage, where we're able to run automatic tests to test the functionality of our application. So here's the thing, testing is important. We will all need to learn testing. I'm a mid-level developer. I've been working on a project from scratch. It was first it was a concept. Now we were building out minimal viable product, and now we're about to start getting users. I'm the only developer, and the only reason we didn't start going with testing first, because it takes time. It takes time to write the tests, but they save time long term. The reason we didn't incorporate the tests from the beginning is because we had a very tight deadline, and we needed to have something that kind of works to show the, you know, finance department and the product department, here's the thing, are there clients that will want to use this service and all this other great stuff. And now the fact that, okay, we want to go with this application, we want to, you know, deploy it, we want to get some users, now testing becomes important because we don't want to deal with issues. So I know I'm like kind of yabbering here forever. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, yes, and Steve says dates are a pain in the ass if you're also taking time zones into consideration. 100%. And that's like I've seen horror stories, not in my current job, but previous job, where people did not take time zones into consideration and the issues it caused. So super important. And then Steve says functional testing is also something you should be familiar with when working on existing projects, and they're expanded through the functionality that touches many files. 100%. Yeah, and you know, this is like where it's an interesting like point, because I agree with you 1000%, and I think having and working for a company where they understand that and build stuff with testing in mind from the start makes sense to me. But I've worked at companies where nobody says anything about testing, and I am amazed how do they deploy applications without stuff breaking all the time. And then stuff does break all the time, and people do have to put out fires and fix stuff and troubleshoot manually. And I have no idea why a lot of these companies don't implement testing, because 100% is going to save thousands of dollars long term. And I think, you know, where I am now, like my next goal, and as I showed kind of like my little roadmap that I'm using personally for myself, you know, I'm going to incorporate test-driven development, and I'm going to work on learning at least writing tests with jests, because that's what I'm using with React. It's built in with React. And then I'm going to learn something called Cypress, which allows you to do end-to-end testing, which allows you to kind of test a user's behavior. And we could like look at some of these things if you guys are interested. But definitely let me know in the comments any of the questions you have, because the most important part about these live streams, I really enjoy talking to you, chatting with you, and definitely want to answer your question. But coming back to this point is that it's not that should you or shouldn't you learn testing, is you have to ask yourself, where are you on your journey? And adding learning, you know, testing or learning algorithms, you have to learn all those things. Don't get me wrong, but learn them in proper context, right? I know a lot of people, they jump into, you know, algorithms and data structures really early on, to a point and they start learning them, spending a lot of time practicing the interviews, but yet themselves, they are ignoring getting better at JavaScript or understanding CSS at a higher level. And so when you ask them to build something, they're not able to build it. They're not able to build a project that you could put clients on or provide some sort of service. So to me, I'm always going for, can you build the thing that someone will pay you money for? Meaning, do you know enough HTML, CSS, and JavaScript and React to be able to build, you know, a product that someone's asking you to build? And then as you're building it, you might come to a point where like, man, I'm using arrays, but it's too slow. So then you do a little research and you're like, oh shoot, I could use a hash table and look things up by the key, which is way faster, you know, or to find things, which way faster, knowing that you know what you're looking for. So you learn a little bit about algorithms. And so you organically introduce those things when you're solving the problems. For instance, a lot of people learning React, they're like Redux, Redux, Redux this, Redux that, Redux that. And then they start learning React before they even know JavaScript well. And then they also add Redux on top of that. And then all of a sudden they slow down. They're not making as much progress because they're like, man, I don't get Redux. Like, and they're learning Redux not because they have a problem that they're trying to solve. They're learning Redux because somebody on YouTube told them they should learn Redux, right? So if you don't know the problem that Redux solves, then you're not ready for Redux. If you are not sure the problem what in your application that testing would solve, you're not ready for testing, right? If you're not sure what JavaScript does in your HTML and CSS application, right, then you need to learn JavaScript first. Then you need to learn React. If you know how to use context API in React, you understand state management, you understand the basics, then you could learn Redux only if it's a problem. If you start building applications that are kind of going to have clients, then you should start, or going to be production ready, then you should learn what are the requirements that will help you to make sure that you have a smooth development cycle when you're building those applications. And this is where testing comes in. So if you don't have a job yet as a junior developer, work on getting a job as a junior developer. And once you get that job, continue to develop your skills. A never ending, you know, process of learning. So let's take a look at the comments here. So never assume your code will be slow when you write it, and only after that should you look at the performance. Here's another thing, yeah, and that's a great point, Steve, you bring up. Also, never create new project with Redux. So here's the thing, like right now, like a lot of the stuff, by the way, is pretty fast. And when you're writing code, and not only Steve just mentioned it, but I heard a lot of people say it, even Wes Boss, a bunch of other people, they say when you're writing code, like don't try to optimize it unless it's an issue, right? If your code is working fine, don't try to optimize it. Don't try to, like, you know, fix something that's not an issue yet. And in my example that I was talking about using arrays versus using a hash table, so I needed to create a lookup table of zip codes. And there's like 100,000 of zip codes in a file. If you try to use find on 100,000 array items, it's going to take some time. And I literally saw that issue in my code, and I was like, using arrays is not going to help me right now. I need to come up with a solution. And this is how I learned about hash tables or dictionaries, or using objects and JavaScript in a way which is faster than using arrays. And I only did that because it was actually an issue in my application, because iterating through bajillion of items was very difficult. And Yep. And I'm going to have to recoil sorts this out. I haven't used it yet. Have to check it out. And this is something, yeah, 100%, 90% of your needs could be solved with context. And the rule of thumb that I started to use, am I good at it? No, but don't try to engineer a solution to your problem, and definitely don't use things that you don't know the issue they solve. Like some will say, use Redux for state management. Why would I use Redux for state management? And if they don't have an answer, they probably shouldn't be using Redux either. I worked in an application where I started with you, this is like a while ago, where I just built the app using Redux because back then I was like, well, people said I should know Redux, so I'm gonna put Redux there. And I was told to refactor or factor Redux out because we didn't need it. And context API worked fine, or even using local storage worked fine. And so that's the thing about testing, is know the problem it solves and only learn and use it and implement it when it becomes something that you need to start learning. And using that example of my roadmap that I made for myself, I forgot that I had another image for something that I did a while ago. Anyway, got to delete that. But anyway, this is the little basic roadmap that I'm following. Even right now, working on TypeScript, working on Node.js, love GraphQL, love me some PostgreSQL. And I'm going to add testing here because that's why I'm on my journey. But if you look at the first row and the second row, I wouldn't add testing there unless you could build a couple of projects, unless you have a portfolio, unless you're actively looking for interviews and you're looking to get your first foot in the door as a junior dev. There's no reason trying to add additional stressors to your learning that you don't even need to know at the moment. But with that being said, let's take a look at, those of you who are here, let's, wondering about testing. Yeah, thanks. This is just for me. Like, I created this roadmap to force myself not to learn something that I shouldn't learn. Like MongoDB, I should take it out. I'm familiar with MongoDB. Like, am I ever using MongoDB? No. Like, when in doubt, I just use Postgres or SQL relationship databases. Because most of the companies I worked for, they worked and used SQL. So I'm like, hey, let me use SQL and stuff like that. Tailwind also, I just put it there because I like it. But honestly, what I'm going to do, I'm going to replace Mongo here. And Tailwind, I'm going to replace it with test-driven development, and probably that for now. So my next focus moving for this year into next year is making sure that I'm comfortable incorporate TypeScript in my React applications, and I'm comfortable learning and starting to at least do basic tests using Jest for unit testing, integration testing, and then uses something like Cypress for end-to-end testing, and starting to make that my goal for 2022. And that's going to be my roadmap, and I'm going to adjust. Yeah, Tailwind is excellent. The only thing, like Steve, I don't like about it, and it's not an issue if you use, like, let's say CSS modules. I don't like sometimes when you write the classes, you end up going off like the screen with the number of class names you're using. So one pattern I saw somebody use is that they will create CSS modules, and then they'll put the Tailwind class names inside the CSS modules, and then they'll just export the CSS module, and it'll be like header or whatever it is, the styling, and it will have in the CSS module export, it will have all the classes. But I like it because it is separate from your HTML and it's living inside your CSS file, which at some point, if you decide to make a change, it's a little bit easier. I don't know if it's the best way, but that's something that I've been doing, for using Tailwind when styling stuff. But for now, to be honest with you, I'm like, because I work on a lot of personal projects, I really like style components. Yeah, and that's literally what I was referring to. So I'm using extends and I'm using it with modules, but you could do it CSS classes as well, 100%. But that's kind of like what I was getting to. I just like CSS modules as well, so I kind of combine those together. But yeah, that's exactly a good point, and that's what I've been doing. But Tailwind is great. I like their UI, really good stuff. And so, yeah, and so for those of you who are learning and building stuff, the most important thing, like as you could see on my roadmap here, I'm limiting myself what I'm trying to practice. And the reason why I'm doing it is because I don't want to learn everything, because then like I'll know a lot about nothing. What I'm trying to say is that you need to kind of set constraints for yourself so you become the best that you can be in the things that you're learning. Like I want to be the best that I can be: JavaScript, React, NodeJS, TypeScript, and GraphQL. Those are the things that I'm focusing right now, and I'm going to continue to focus on them until someone tells me you can't get a job knowing these technologies. Then I'll move to something else. And same thing, and so I'm going to adjust this by, in my third row, add test-driven development, because I feel like at this point where I'm at my journey, it is a good thing to start learning. But I would not learn it at the beginning, because it just add additional stuff for you to focus on when it's not an issue that you have to solve yet. Like if you can't build a basic project, you're not familiar, you're not able to easily talk about the code that you're writing, talk about tests and try to learn testing is irrelevant. Now, if you were looking to get into testing, you know, there's obviously a lot of different stuff to know. So if you're looking to start out, like, I don't know enough about testing, what you should do, like, just use Google, you know, and read up. So like read up, what is test-driven development? You know, start with getting basic articles and, you know, take a look at them, you know, and then you could see like here, test-driven development refers to a style of programming in which three activities are tightly interwoven: coding, testing, and design. So, and how would you describe? You would write a single unit test describing an aspect of the program. You would run the test, which will fail immediately because you haven't implemented the solution yet. Then you write just enough code to make the test pass, and then you refactor, and then you repeat that cycle. And as you saw earlier, there were a couple of pictures here. Let me go back here on my code here. My internet is so slow in this household. I apologize, but it's okay. So let me go back here. And here's like the mantra for test-driven development. It's basically red, green, refactor. Write a failing test, make the test pass, and refactor. And unit test is something that is basically testing the smallest piece of your code, like a single function. And what I would say, if you guys looking to get into testing, getting started with something simple like running basic unit tests with just for React, testing single functions, is a pretty good place to start. So we talked about what is test-driven development, and we could now, as you're learning more about it, you could Google types of tests in test-driven development. And so Google is your friend. And again, I love Googling because there's really no reason why you guys shouldn't, and you guys all know this, and you could learn more about it. But in terms of like, you know, start reading the articles. But if you're living the React world or JavaScript world, I would say start with Jest, easiest way to get started. And you could learn about the benefits, the three phases that we talked about, which is red, green, refactor. They talk about how it fits into agile development and a lot of great important stuff. But in just for the simplicity and argument, you know, I know that there's unit testing. So unit testing in TTD. A TTF. I don't know what the hell is TTF. I can't spell. You guys all know that I can't spell. And you could kind of look through this. I'm just kind of like Googling with you guys. So basically a unit test, like we said, is testing the smallest element, like a single function or one component. Then you could do integrated testing, which is a little bit more complex, where you're testing a couple of different things. It could be a React component and let's say some sort of hook or some other component, and you just want to make sure that both those components work really well. And a good place to start, like I was talking about, is using Jest for testing. So if you guys are curious about getting into testing, the best place to start is literally go to jest.js.io, click get started, and it literally shows you a very simple example. Here's a function that they want to test. Here's a simple test that they run. They give it a description saying, you know, 1 + 2 should equal 3. Then they run the test. You know, it expects they pass the function that they want to test. Let me make that bigger. And they want the answer to be 3. And obviously, if it's more complex, you know, you would write more complex tests, and you could learn more about it through their documentation. So go to jest.js.io, open up their docs, and play around with it, right? And this is something that will allow you to do unit testing and integration testing. I believe you could use Jest and Puppeteer to write end-to-end testing, but what I would say, guys, this is something that I'm more interested in, and a lot of people recommend it, is I believe it's Cypress end-to-end testing. And let's see here. Yeah, if you go to cypress.io, you could learn more about it. And it's basically an amazing library that will allow you to test user interaction, right? So you'll be able to write tests where people will be able to, you know, test the search functionality or a login form. Basically, it will test exactly how a user behaves on your application. And this becomes very important because, again, every time you make changes in your application, every time you add new features, you want to make sure that you're never introducing breaking changes to your application. And so in this case, what I would say is, once you build 3 projects in your portfolio, you're already working as a junior developer, learning testing becomes, you know, very important, especially as you're learning to get to that mid-level development. And so I'm a big believer in, whenever you're getting into programming, right, it shouldn't be like, what is the easiest and quickest way to get to where I'm going? But I am with the mindset of, what's the least amount of things I need to learn to get the junior developer job? What is the next step in my learning journey to learn so I could consider myself a mid-level developer? And what do I need to do to go from mid-level developer to go to senior developer and learn things in steps, right? You want to have a progressive kind of journey where you're not trying to learn everything at once, because trying to learn everything at once, you're going to literally be frozen in place and not make any progress. So I stand in my belief is that everybody who's learning to code, anybody who wants to be a developer, you're doing it because you love coding, you love programming, and that means you know that you a lifelong student who's going to continue to learn new things, continue to develop yourself as a developer, and you'll never stop your journey. So you are going to get better at algorithms and data structure. You are going to learn testing. You are going to learn all those things that are required for you, because that's how you level up as a developer. So in terms of my advice, when should you learn testing, and when it is an issue that you're trying to solve? So before we kind of look at the comments, look at the questions, let me just kind of reiterate, you know, if you're starting on your journey, you're learning to code, you need to know the basics. Start with Git, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, Sass, right? That's a bare minimum you should know. Once you know that, learn React, working with APIs, learn some CSS framework like Bootstrap or Tailwind. I would start with Bootstrap because a lot of people are still using Bootstrap. It's very common, you know. then maybe learn GraphQL, definitely learn Postgres, SQL database, maybe learn TypeScript, learn some Node, build some applications. And once you're at that point, you could start deepening your knowledge in algorithms and data structures. You could start deepening your knowledge and introducing and incorporating testing. Notice how I wouldn't recommend doing testing on this first or second row, because you don't even have a project that you built for your portfolio. So you have nothing to show. There's no point of trying to learn something that you're not going to be using. So with that being said, in this, my personal journey, the way I'm going to change this is I'm going to, here after Postgres, I'm going to add test-driven development. That's going to be my next focus. To put things in perspective, would say that I'm getting closer to mid-level developer, and this is where, for me, learning test-driven development and starting to implement it in my current projects, understanding what it is, and little by little improving my ability to test my applications with Jest, writing first a very simple unit test, then getting better understanding how to test and do integration testing, where it's a couple of different things that you try to test and make sure they work with each other in relationship to each other. And more importantly, writing those end-to-end tests where you could use something like Cypress, which allows you to test user functionality in your application. And notice how, yes, learning testing is very important, just not at the beginning of your journey, and only learning testing when it becomes a issue that you have and a problem you're trying to solve. So let's take a look at the comments here. We have a lot of great discussion going here. Yeah, so Anna says, asking Steve, any advice on how to learn to build and deploy without Create React app? I want to try deploy something that is closer to production level. And by the way, just like Steve says, why do you think Create app isn't for production? And Create React app, you could have a, basically when you're developing in your development environment, you're obviously, and you could use env file to determine which you want to use development, but then you could make it production ready, and when you deploy, you're just going to use all the production settings for your NV, and it is a production ready thing. The only thing is you're basically not writing the Webpack configuration and all that other configuration with Babel and all that other stuff yourself from scratch. Why do it from scratch if somebody else already has a great way of doing it by using Create React app? I'm not saying that you can't write stuff from scratch, but unless there's a specific issue where writing and creating that stuff from scratch solves, in my opinion, Create React app is perfectly fine. And that's actually both companies that I worked for, our application was built using Create React app. In the current company I'm working and the last company I'm working, and both those applications are production ready. And Anna, this is actually like a really common misconception. I was under the impression it was built for to help beginners to get started, and that's not true. And I used to think the same thing until I talked to a lot of my friends who work as senior developers. They're like, yeah, we use Create React app to build our production application. And Steve says that he also used Preact and Mustache. I'm familiar with Mustache. I haven't used Preact yet, but that's kind of interesting. Yeah, that's another concept, which is I haven't personally used, but I know a lot of people use monorepos for their applications. And Steve says they allow you to manage complex projects much easier. And yeah, that's true. I haven't had any experience with monorepos yet, but that's interesting. And then Engine Boy was saying how at his internship, people sent him a massive restaurant merchant application to put some work, and they have like 250 files inside. Source folder exploded my brain. Yeah, that's not that abnormal, believe it or not. Yeah, similar stuff. That's cool. I haven't literally tried Preact yet. You know, man, but it's crazy how much stuff there's to learn. And it blows my mind when someone says like I've been doing this for a while now, and for the longest time I thought I was like barely a junior level developer, because the amount of stuff that you have to learn, you know, and half the stuff like you know, Preact, Mustache, you know, monorepo, all this other stuff, it's just like, for a lot of people, even for me, like 80% of that is like new stuff I haven't even heard about it. And so what blows my mind is when people say how you could get a job making 100K a year at least after 3 months of some sort of boot camp. And I call BS on that, because God damn it, I would have never been able to learn all the things that I'm currently using at my current role. And by the way, I know that I don't know a lot. Like, I know that I'm probably at like 2% of knowledge that's available there for being a good developer, and I have like 98% of stuff that I have to learn. And knowing that just blows my mind. And when I see people talk about like, oh, 3 months you could, you know, get a job making bajillion dollars or like whatever, like I think it's doing disservice for anybody who's really looking to learn to code, because it sets wrong expectations. Because learning to code is hard, it takes work, and from the standpoint outside of things even being hard, there's just so much stuff to learn. And we talked about learning testing, what kind of testing. So I said about, in terms of learning testing, and I'll kind of bring it up here again, is make sure that before you, in my opinion, and this is just an opinion, before you start learning testing, make sure you have like a good fundamental roadmap. And we talk about just getting started with testing. And, you know, learn your HTML, CSS, JavaScript, learn React, how to work with application, working with APIs, you know, building stuff. You should be able to build at least 3 projects for your portfolio that showcase at least the first row and the second row of technologies that you're able to use. And only start learning about testing when it becomes an issue. And the interesting thing here, Techno Utopia, you talk about QA, and it's true, there's a lot of companies that actually have designated QA departments which will do the testing yourself. The type of testing that I was referring is testing that you will do as a developer, mostly focusing on test-driven development. Early in the stream, we talked about why this is important. And so as a beginner who's a developer, who's looking to go from, you're already working, by the way, you already have a job as a junior developer. You're not trying to get a job in QA, right? You already have a job as a junior developer, and you're looking to transition going from junior developer to a mid-level developer. Then that's when you start learning testing. And the 3 types of testing that we talked about, this is from the standpoint of working with React, because I do a lot of React, is doing unit testing, learning integration testing, and then learning end-to-end testing. And you don't have to master all those concepts at once. You could start by writing simple unit tests. As you learn more about using Jest library to write tests, you could start incorporating more integration testing. And for end-to-end, like I showed on this previous page, I recommend people learning and how, or getting comfortable using Cypress to be able to do all those things for. And the reason why let me check this last comment here. Techno Utopia, isn't that what the QA team for? And here's the thing is, you might be working for a startup company. Like for instance, I work for a company where there's 3 developers. There's a senior developer, there's me, and then there's a Python developer. And as the complexity of your application rises, it becomes actually, and you're starting to put clients on it, you're going, or you're going to have clients, and you know that that application is going to have, you know, continuous deployment. You always want to make sure that you're never committing broken changes to your repo. And as one developer who's working on it, you don't want to spend hours and hours doing manual testing. So you want to start to write and automate tests that you can. And this is the problem, exactly the issue that I'm having at my job, is that I don't want to spend my time retesting and testing the application to make sure I didn't break anything, when all those things could be automated. And I'm 100% sure my boss would much rather have me spend time now, write the tests that I could run automatically, rather than pay me each time I'm doing those tests manually. And why add more complexity to your job? Because it solves. So here's the thing. When you start working on a project, you start on a small project or even your personal project, and it's small, it's kind of nice, it's very easy to manage. And basically what happens is that once you start adding more features, more things, your application will outgrow your ability to be able to track of things that that application does. And you'll actually you won't even remember what the hell certain things do, right? You'll come back to a code you wrote a week ago and you're like, I don't even know what this is, right? And so to make things easier, as your tests, you know, as your application grows, you will be doing yourself and your teammates a huge favor by implementing tests. And even at my small company, my boss did not tell me to start using testing. It's just a problem I saw of constantly manually testing stuff, and then little by little, certain bugs I will miss because I didn't have or follow test-driven development. If I would have done it from the start, which wasn't a requirement yet because we were just building basically a, not even the MVP, but proof of concept first. And now that we're actually building a product, my boss at this point said we want to have at least 70% coverage for our application with tests, to make sure that a lot of that stuff we could test automatically, and make sure that before any deployment or any new feature that we implement, we're able to catch those errors. And believe me, when you have, you know, not your like toy app, like I'm building an application on Tuesdays, which right now it's kind of small, very simple, but over time, like I'm going to keep developing this idea until it's done. And I have this grand idea for it. And I know 100% that for even that application, implementing testing is going to save me time long term. What I'm saying is that when you're starting out as a junior developer, you start first with doing console logs, and you're like, oh, look, console logs everywhere, this is great. Then you're going to start like, okay, I'm going to be a little bit better about this. I'm going to use the VS Code debugger or Chrome debugger. I'm going to set breakpoints. I'm going to, you know, write, you know, which variables I want to keep, like watch, what I need to do. And then eventually you're like, it still takes time when you're troubleshooting stuff. Why don't I just do stuff where I already wrote the test before I wrote the implementation, and now I'm able to test all that stuff. So hologram nunchucks, I have no idea, because I just started learning testing this month, because it's now an issue that I'm looking to solve. So Tech Utopia, so should I be testing all my small projects with Cypress? No, like, by the way, are you currently employed as a developer? That'll be my first question. So if you don't have a junior development position, like if you still try to break into the field, you need to make sure that you have portfolios. You got to make sure that you're networking. You got to make sure that your resume and your ability to interview for the roles that you're looking to get hired, you're able to fulfill the requirements and get the job. So if you're not working as a junior developer, I would say don't worry about testing at this point, unless you're looking to get hired as a QA. Now, once you've been working as a junior developer and you're looking and you start to make that transition to, like, I'm a mid-level developer at this point. That's what people tell me. I still feel like I don't know anything, but I'm a mid-level developer. there's a need for testing where I'm working now because it solves a very specific issue. And this is why now, after a year and a half, I've been working, now I've been working almost 3 years as a developer. And now after 3 years, I'm at a point where in my career journey, testing is becoming something very important and something that I need to start learning to, number one, to progress deeper into my mid-level role, and also to, that's the next thing that makes sense for me to learn. And if you are a junior level developer and you don't even have a job, you don't have to worry about this stuff yet. Yeah, so Steve, this is a great point. And so he says, Cypress is okay for end-to-end, but learn Jest first. And 100%. So learn Jest and start with basic unit testing first, then learn integration testing and be able to test your React. And there's a lot of tests you could do before you even need to do end-to-end testing. And by the way, end-to-end testing, you could test manually as well, like yourself, by clicking stuff and filling the information. But I think if you want to automate that stuff, learning something as Cypress definitely is a good place to go. That's a great question. So I have a friend, she went and got a QA bootcamp, and she's trying to get into development through QA, where you're going to be mostly doing testing. And yes, you can start as a QA and then learn development and then transition. Or, again, I think both approaches work. I started as a front-end developer, got a job, then started focusing on learning back-end development, where I am today. And then now I'm starting to learn testing. And what I say is that both paths will get you a job. But what you need to do, and this is, let me come back to this image again. Here, 1 second, is you need to have a path that you outline for yourself that will allow you not to lose focus of what you're trying to accomplish, and make sure that you have something that you stick to. Like, this is my roadmap. And after Postgres here, I'm going to add TDD development, because this is going to be something I'm focusing for 2022. And you need to stick within your game plan. Whatever your game plan is, you got to have your goal and you have to stay focused on achieving it. And if you have to know what are the bare minimum requirements to be a junior, and you have to make sure that you can fulfill those first and make sure you get able to get hired before starting to introduce any higher level stuff. And 100% basics of YouTube or the documentation. And then works better the other way around. Yeah. Yeah, and Jest, by the way, if I wasn't clear, you need to learn Jest first. And thanks for Steve kind of clarifying that. Like, Jest will be the first thing you learn to test, like JavaScript. You could test vanilla JS, you could test NodeJS, you could test your React application. And the simplest tests you're going to start with are going to be unit tests. And they're fairly easy to start with. So you could literally start learning about testing by learning, Jest and unit tests. The only reason I'm learning Cypress now is because I don't want to manually be doing all that testing if I'm able to write a test. Yep, and 100%. Steve says Jest will let you concentrate on your code first to get the grips with what testing can be ultimately used for. And that's 100% true. And by the way, like, starting to think about testing, like, and again, I'm a beginner with testing. Don't think I'm some sort of expert. I'm just starting out. And it's like, I started at my work, I wrote some simple unit tests to get started. Like, next on my list is writing some integration tests. And I'm learning just like everybody else. But just switching my mindset at this idea of failing test and then writing your code to pass that test, it's forcing you to think about your code a little bit differently. Where before I used to write the stuff hoping it works, but now you have a mechanism to test if your code is going to work. Yep, and that's exactly true. Although I don't recommend writing React without JSX, but 100% true. And man, always love Steve jumping in here. And Steve, I sent you an email. Thank you. I finally got your email, and I was saying I would love to have you on the live stream, and we could record it, not like whenever is best time for you. So it doesn't have to be only during the times I stream, but I do have a lot of cool questions to ask. And actually, yeah, and so the thing that like the biggest like thing for me in terms of web development and getting hired is this constant, almost like having your own like testing within yourself. Like when I started this journey, I didn't know that I was going to get hired. I just knew that this is something that I want to do, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to get the skills to be able to do the work, and then learn anything else that I need to learn to help me get my first job. Hence, I have this YouTube channel. I don't have this YouTube channel. Like, I love talking to you, but this YouTube channel, not only does it provide value for you guys, don't get me wrong, but it provides value to me in terms of building my authority as a developer. I'm constantly talking about code. I don't care if I embarrass myself. I don't care if people say I suck, but it allows me to practice talking about the code, being involved in the community, and marketing myself. Like, I met Steve through this YouTube channel, right? I met a bunch of other people through this YouTube channel who now are connections, and I've actually had interviews based off my networking because of my YouTube channel. Also, I'm constantly involved on my LinkedIn. I'm always trying to talk to recruiters or other developers because I want to build my social circle on LinkedIn to be able to find opportunities when I'm ready to get hired. I also have friends who are developers who are, I constantly talk about, who, you know, will tell me about opportunities available in their companies, and they will also tell me if I'm ready for that job role or not. And one of the best things you could do when you're looking to get your first junior development job is having a good friend to refer you to a position. Because if you're just throwing your resumes out there, I'm not saying that it's not going to work, but especially when you don't have the experience that people are looking for or other stuff like that, it's very hard for someone to take a chance on you. So if you have a referral, someone that could refer you, say like, I know this guy Paul, he's really good, I think he'll be right for this role, you know, then it's going to be very tough. So I'm big, you know, learn the basics: HTML, CSS, JavaScript, React, 100%. Number two, though, make sure you have GitHub. Make sure you're constantly posting code there. Make sure you have your website. Make sure you have your LinkedIn. And here, I'll show you kind of example as a bare minimum. This is something you need to have, like, in order to get hired. Before I show you that, let me just quickly answer Steve here. Okay, so it's Sunday for you, so this time will be fine. Yeah, so let's do something after the holidays. Yeah, 100%, because we all have to enjoy our holidays and spend time with the family. But after that, 100% would love to have you here. Would love to chat about you and about like your experience. And I do want to talk to you about what you're looking when you're hiring junior developers, because there's so, I mean, obviously everybody's different, but I think I want to tease out what are the most important things for junior developers to be able to showcase, to be able to get hired. And I'm not talking about FANG type of companies, but, you know, general companies, to be able to have the skill to get hired. Because for me, getting that first job was the hardest thing. But kind of talked about here, for those of you, you know, looking to get hired initially, it's not just about learning the code. Obviously, you need to learn how to code, but some other basics like building your network. Like, for instance, you know, I have paulbraslavsky.com. It's my basic, I call this my resume website, where people could learn more about me, get connected, see some of the things that I do, you know, see my resume. And I don't have my portfolio section here. I specifically took it out because a lot of people wait to set this website up until they have projects. Don't wait. set something up like this, even if you don't have portfolio projects yet. And as your portfolio grows, or you have projects that you want to add to it, you could have a portfolio section here where you could add those projects. I also have, you know, my GitHub, right? Like, I'm not saying like you should be active on GitHub. I'm not saying it has to be like this ridiculous. Some people are even more ridiculous than I am, but people are not going to check every line of code you write, but they want to see that if you're looking to get hired as a developer, that means you're constantly doing some sort of development stuff, regardless if it's at work or if it's doing your daily studies at home. So you should have some sort of commits, which basically showcase like your history of development, right? That this just shows that you're not just talking about coding, you're actually doing the coding. And the next thing, you want to make sure that you have LinkedIn, and you want to make sure that you have a good resume. And we talk more about this on this channel and stuff like that. Here's my current resume. Okay, whatever, I need to make it bigger, but you guys get the point. I have my resume here. And, you know, I have my prior history. If you're able to get like recommendations, you know, it's great to have because it adds social proof on your LinkedIn that you're in the game. You're in to get into development, or you are a developer, and you have like social proof from other developers that say nice things about you. And again, this didn't happen overnight for me. This took a lot of time to build, but you know, you need to have those basics. You need to have a simple website that's kind of like your business card resume website that you could easily show to people. You need to have and be on LinkedIn is a must if it's available in your country. And 100% you need to have, at the bare minimum, you need to have a GitHub. And also I like, you know, Steve's idea here, you know, find like a good open source project and join, and you know, start adding even like the basic stuff or writing documentation or what have you. And me personally, I haven't done any open source projects. Super 100% like committed, just trying to build my personal projects, but doing social open source projects is a great way to build experience. And Engine Boy's asking, the portfolio built on your project? No, I don't. For your portfolio site, especially something like this, like I didn't build it myself. I literally just bought a template. I wanted something literally be my business card, not showcase my development skill, but be about me, and something where I could add my, you know, projects, you know, from Netlify to here later. So I literally used Bootstrap Made, and I bought a template from here, Bootstrap Made. God damn it, I didn't say boots, I said Bootstrap Made. And so free templates here, they're very professional looking. Here's the one that I used here. Let's take a look at the preview, right? This is literally the same thing I used. And look, they have the portfolio section. Just removed it for now, just to say to people, you don't need to have a portfolio to get started. Don't make excuses, just do it. And I just filled this in with the relative information for my job. So this is the template that I used. You could get it for free from this website. I spent $20 because I didn't want the watermark. So here's my site. You know, I kind of used my orange color that I liked. And so, and then whatever best projects you have that you built, you could add them here. So I have a lot of my projects on Netlify, and so, you know, I have a lot of my projects hosted on Netlify, and so like I could add these to my portfolio site that I got from Bootstrap. Listen, and so like this is my community one project that we're working on. By the way, if you want to see me fail and miserably build projects, I'm working on this. My internet's slow at the home, but I'm working on this project live every Tuesday. It's slowly taking shape, you know, and I'm building this to allow you guys to showcase your projects here. What's cool, by the way, we're starting to have some users. So here's somebody else that is James, who's now a user on this application that I'm building. I really appreciate him jumping on, you know, and He's sharing his live demo to his site that he built, which is kind of neat and cool. It's an API that allows you, an application that allows you to look up stuff by the IP. So he has this example here, which is kind of cool. So I'm building a application to manage projects. There's going to be a lot of stuff to it, but whatever. I'm getting ahead of myself. Yeah, but you could then take the projects from Netlify and put them here in this amazing template that I got for free. And Steve, I share your sentiment. I also hate Bootstrap, but sometimes like you work at a company where they use Bootstrap for whatever reason, so you just use Bootstrap. But Tailwind's nice, Bootstrap is nice if people paying you money to do it. And Material UI is good if you're doing like React stuff for sure. Like I work at a company where they use Material UI. Like what I found out for, if you're building stuff by yourself and you just want to prototype something really quick, using something like Bootstrap or even Tailwind or even whatever else like framework that allows you to kind of get up and running fairly quickly, it's not a bad idea. Like for my application currently, like I'm using React Bootstrap just so I could make it look not as ugly, right? And I'm not caring about CSS at this point. I'm just working and caring that the functionality is there. And eventually what I'm going to do, I found this awesome on ThemeForest. I found this awesome template, and so I found this awesome template. Let me show what it is. And I'm going to literally, once I get the majority functionality done, I'm going to kind of use this as a inspiration, I guess. My cat's in my way of my screen. Use it as inspiration, but I'm gonna kind of make that dev hunt kind of, I don't know. Yeah, kind of look like this. I'm probably gonna make this dark, and so eventually dev hunt is gonna look something similar like this, which will allow you to manage your projects. You'll have an ability to see your project page. Well, you'll have like, okay, here's the project I'm working on, here's the people that are helping me, and you'll be able to have comments. You'll be able to have like steps and bugs and features that you're adding. But this is like a while, it'll take a while to get to this point. Right now, this is what we got. So if you want to see me struggle and fail, more than welcome to join me on Tuesday nights, 7 p.m. Central Time, where we're kind of slowly building out this application. And let me kind of get back here. Yep, so Steve says Material UI is okay if you're developing for Android and all that other great stuff, or want it to look like Google, I guess. Sorry for the random question, but do you ever re-export by using barrels? Not exactly sure what you're referring to. At least I haven't done that. Interested to know what that is. Oyeso says, but CSS frameworks do solve a problem and keep everyone on the same page. Yes, and what I like about it, yeah, 100%, and you can take the time and add some additional styling or theming to make it look different than what somebody else does. I mean, I believe that if you're, whatever the requirement is. Now, like for me, I'm using Bootstrap because right now I don't care about CSS, but I'm going to go back and I'm going to rewrite all the CSS eventually in my application. Yep, and then talking about Ionic 5 and Stencil for building web components. So yeah, for sure. Like, here's the thing. when you build few basic projects, it's fine. You have to understand though, there's a certain level of requirements that people are looking for, and it's okay if, like, because I have this issue too. Some of my projects, I felt like maybe, you know, to me and to myself, but I felt like they weren't good enough. I still included them in my portfolio. So I had 3 projects, and with each better project I built, what I would do is I would take the worst one out of the previous 3 I had, and then I would replace it with the better project in my portfolio. So that's what I would recommend. Yeah, there's so much stuff. Yeah, so much stuff. And Steve says there's no such as to basic for portfolio project. And, you know, like, I don't know if it's my imposter syndrome or some of the things that I've built before, like, I didn't think they were good enough for me to get hired. And maybe it's subjective, but I feel like definitely put whatever you have. So like, let's say if you have nothing, put something. If you have something, replace out of that something, the worst one, with slightly better projects. So as you get better with your knowledge as a developer, with each iteration, have a better, slightly better project. And over time, you're going to have like your top best projects in your portfolio. Like for me, I'm really kind of big on this idea of that. Don't settle for what you have and constantly work on making better or more advanced or more whatever. Like for instance, I used to use REST API, then I built a project using GraphQL, or, you know, I used to, so like little by little, like add new things to your projects to make it more, like, I guess, don't settle for what you have and think it's enough. Like, I'm always paranoid that what I have is not good enough, and that like I have to constantly strive to make better things, build stuff. That's why, like today we talked about, like, at my level, being a mid-level developer is like getting and learning testing and getting better at writing tests and all that other great stuff. So I know we've been going strong. I appreciate all the likes. I appreciate all of you guys, because without you guys, there's no sense of having this live stream. You know what I mean? Because you guys are the reason why this YouTube channel exists. Without you guys, I'll be some random dude on the internet. And the reason why I don't mind sharing my journey, I don't mind when people dislike my stuff or they say I suck or I don't know what I'm doing, is because I'm not afraid to put myself out there and to show my journey of what it takes to become a developer and the step that it takes. Because everybody in today's society is living life through these Instagram fake, like Insta models or whoever who use these fake, always put themselves in the best light possible. So you get very unrealistic representation of what the journey is. And so I'm here just trying to give you the real and the reality of what it takes to learn to code, the struggle that I go through. And I'm not somebody who's just talking. I'm employed. I work as a developer. I make, you know, decent money as a developer. I started making $13.75 dollars an hour, which is unbelievably low as a React developer. Now I make around 80K, and then like I keep moving up the ladder. And so I started from nothing. Now I'm somewhere. And so the stuff that I talk about is the stuff that at least worked for me to go someone who was, you know, in his late 30s to be able to get into this field at 39. So if you're younger than I am, let me be, like, don't let age or what have you, especially if you're younger, be an excuse. Like, if I could do it, you guys can't do it. And so the point is, I'm not afraid to talk about my journey. I don't sell anything on YouTube, at least yet. Maybe one day, you know, buy my course, because I want a sports car or whatever. Like, my goal here as a YouTuber is one day to obviously make YouTube profitable, because why not? I'm putting so much time in it. But that's not my main goal. My main goal to be the best developer I can be, or grow as a developer month to month, year to year, so I could go from mid-level to senior level, and maybe one day to be an architect. You know what I mean? Those are the goals that I aspire to, and that's what I want to kind of say to you guys. Is that's why I put myself out there, because
like, I want everybody to kind of see it's okay to make mistakes. Like if you saw my last live stream, like I haven't worked with React Router 6. I had pretty much the comments section was what I was using to refactor my code, listening to you guys, you know, and like, that's why I love this community, because I'm not here to be like, I'm better than you. Follow me because I'm a guru. No, I'm some random dude on the internet who's trying to be a better developer. And that's why I love this community, because you're all in a similar mindset as me. And this is the reason why I have a particular channel. That's why I'm not, you know, Josh Fluke of YouTube or Chris Sean of YouTube, because I'm a developer. I want to be better developer than I am today. I want to talk about the truth of what it is to code. I don't want to talk about the drama of coding. I don't want to talk about nonsense of coding. I want to talk about stuff that actually helps you to get hired and continue to grow as a developer. And this is why I love when I have people like Steve joining in, talking about actual code, and all of you guys joining in, asking questions and doing all the great stuff. So if you guys don't have any questions, I just want to say I love all of you guys so much. You guys are the best, because you make this community awesome. And I'm just so thankful and lucky to have the pleasure to have you allow me to have this live stream, chat with you guys. I love it, you know. So with that being said, thank you so much for the time tonight. I hope if I don't see you before the holidays, wherever you guys are, you have great holidays, no matter what holidays you celebrate, with your families, with your friends. I hope only the best things to happen to you. And with that being said, if you guys don't have any more questions, I'd like to bid you good night or good morning, wherever you are. And if you like what you saw here, hey, consider subscribing. Smash the like button, even though it's too late because we're about to end the stream. But also, I do a Tuesday night stream where we actually coding and build stuff. That's 7 p.m. Central Time, US Central Time. And then I also do a Power Hour podcast / live stream on Coding Addict YouTube channel, which is pretty awesome. So you could catch me there. But with that being said, guys, thank you so much. Have good holidays, all of you guys. Thanks, Hologram Nunchucks. Thanks, Steve. I enjoy your live stream, Paul. Your current target market is great. Yeah, I'm so happy. And Steve, like, man, I gotta like say, man, someone with your experience to watch someone like me on the live stream, I really appreciate it, because it is giving me some sort of like social proof that I'm actually making improvements and getting somewhere instead of just being some random dude on YouTube. Anna, thank you so much. You the man, Paul. Anna, we're still gonna one day do jujitsu after the holidays though. Have a great holiday, everyone. From Jeev, thanks, my man. And Engine Boy, have a great holiday. Thank you so much. And if all of you guys, some of you guys always, every time I end the stream, more people jump on the stream. I might have to maybe do the stream a little bit later so we could go a little bit longer. But guys, if you missed the stream, you could always rewatch them on my YouTube channel. Love you all. Everybody have a good night. Happy holidays. I'll see you guys later. And of course, everybody loves the kitty cat, so the kitty cat's gonna look cute for a minute. And the kitty cat's always jumping on the keyboard all the time when I try to do stuff. But yeah, you know, Dan, good to see you. And everybody, if you missed the stream, I'll see you guys next one. You could check out any of the previous streams, but I'm here every Saturday, 7 p.m. Central Time, every Tuesday, 7 p.m. Central Time, and Monday, 8 p.m. Pacific Time on Coding Addicts channel. So with that being said, love you so much. Thank you so much. Have happy holidays. All the best, and I'll see you guys later.